as they pop up. So, hi, welcome to this evening's webinar. I'm Tara King, I'm the Vice Chair of Sustainable Wales, and welcome to our third in our series of the 4 webinars this October on the circular economy. If you missed the last 2 weeks, then don't worry, we have recorded those and we are putting them up on YouTube every week after the meeting. So they're available and you can have another look at them. But just as a quick recap, on week 1, we asked about why do we need a circular economy in Wales. We had some fantastic speakers and we learned that there are many reasons, not just for reducing our impact on the planet, but for addressing things like food justice, social justice, and creating a more resilient and collective economy and society in Wales, all those other reasons as well. And in week 2, we asked, is zero waste lifestyle possible? And we learned that nearly all of our products in our households today are replaceable by more sustainable products that don't do things like leach microplastics into our water and environment from washing up, and that we all hold clothing stock that can be reused and repurposed many, many times over, and we all have far too many, far too much already. But I think most importantly, what I learned and took from that session was that we've got a very innovative and creative and caring community in Wales, and that there is so much good practice out there that we can all share and that we can learn from and make our own small or large personal and or business changes for the better. So there is so much opportunity to do that. And that's really why as Sustainable Wales, and I'd also like to introduce our chair, Sarah Murphy, who's online with us tonight, and Margaret, who was the originator and the original Sustainable Wales, who have been campaigning for many years for this kind of activity to develop sustainable and ethical consumerism. And we're really, really excited about the imminent Welsh Government Circular Economy Strategy and how Wales is becoming a circular innovation nation. And that, you know, we're growing our green economy for jobs and the environment, and we truly believe that we can have both. And I think that's the message. So tonight we want to create a very comfortable space where we can come together from across Wales and elsewhere. We've got Chidubem from the North Yorkshire, West Yorkshire area, who can be asked the questions about aspects of the circular economy, so everybody here can share their thoughts and experiences. There is no right or wrong question. We've all got many questions in this area. We've got people that can help who've established circular economy businesses, and it doesn't matter whether you've been doing that for decades or whether you were just starting out. We really welcome you this evening. And there is no daft questions, and comments and sharing experience very welcome, so please use the chat. And what I'm going to try and do is pick up the questions as we go through, and I'll ask you to ask them at the appropriate time as I pick them up. We'll try and stick to the 1 hour and 15 minutes. And the format for tonight is quite simple. There's a couple of slides from some of the presenters. They will talk through, and then we will ask questions, but there may be question prompts I put in there as well as we go through. And I will certainly pick up then your questions from the panels. So let's get started. Can the circular economy create jobs? And our first speaker tonight is Chidubem Nwabufo. And sorry, I've just let somebody in. And Chidubem is currently Circular Economy Manager at West Yorkshire Combined Authority, managing the resource efficient business circular economy programme. And that programme supports businesses in the region with developing their circular economy business models and integrating circular principles, i.e. designing out waste and keeping resources in use for longer into their business operations. Previously, Chidubem was a circular economy and sustainability consultant for Ricardo Energy and Environment, where she supported businesses to develop solutions to sustainability and waste-related challenges. And her work particularly focused on the fashion industry and textiles, which has been quite a running theme for us in our talks. And she'd do that by assessing the manufacturers' supply chains, models that they're currently working on in their businesses, And Chidubem also supported local authorities and joint waste partnerships in improving their waste services. She's a very experienced practitioner of Prince2, and she's also worked in successful circular economy projects across the UK and Australia. And on top of all of that, Chidubem is also involved in creative projects such as Zine Productions and startups, having started Impact Fashion, a fashion technology project which works to reduce the amount of textile waste sent to UK landfills. So I'm going to hand over to Chidubem to make her presentation. Sorry, I'm just making sure I can do that. Apologies, technology is not my strong point. I'm handing over now. Make host. There you go. Chidubem, you have the reins. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to just quickly share my screen. Hopefully it should be somewhat seamless. Tell me if you can see it. Perfect. But I'm going to put my camera off because sometimes that affects the quality. So you're not just going to hear my voice. But I thought, 2 seconds, I'm just going to turn my camera off so it doesn't affect the quality. Perfect. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. So as Tara basically introduced, my name is Chidubem. I'm the Circular Economy Manager for West Yorkshire. Today I wanted to discuss with you some of the reasons, kind of set in the context for the business talks and all our discussions around jobs, the context of some of the reasons why environmental, circular and sustainable action should be taken. I thought I'd use fashion and textiles as a case study because as Tara's bio kind of highlighted, I'm quite passionate about that area. And I think it's a relatively complex sector, so can provide some really good context for businesses across the piece. As my work involves primarily engaging with businesses, I thought it'd be best to focus on the business case for taking action. But part of my presentation will also highlight some of the, I guess, opportunities for individuals in terms of skills and job opportunities for the future. So in terms of my plan, so my plan for today is to first highlight the whys, what some of the opportunities that might be available, outline some of the challenges, because as we all know, there are plenty. And then hopefully finish on a positive note, showcasing some of the work that we're doing within Yorkshire, but also covering jobs that will be created and skills that will be required. Before I begin, I thought it'd be useful to share how I'm framing environmental, circular and sustainable action for this talk. So I'm thinking about them as concepts that kind of sit within each other. So sustainable action is kind of the overall circle, and you have both circularity and environmental sitting within that circle. So why should you be interested in taking environmental, circular and sustainable action? I've identified 4 areas that are likely to cause you to want to create change. The first, of course, is legislation and governmental guidance and direction. So legislation tends to be highlighted as the most effective way to create change. However, governmental commitments, as well as voluntary agreements such as the Kyoto Protocol, the Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals have been found to move the needle. So while the Kyoto Protocol, where 37 industrial countries committed to reducing their carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions by 5%, received mixed reviews on its conclusion in 2012, it actually laid the foundation for more ambitious targets to be set in the Paris agreements. Kyoto is also said to have innovated and introduced carbon trading into the environmental conversation. The Millennial Development Goals also moved the needle, even though some of the targets were missed. So if you take, for example, child mortality, that fell by about a half, even though it missed its target of two-thirds reduction. So I say all of this to say that governmental guidance, even in form of voluntary agreements, create change. This is important, especially today, because governments across the globe are increasingly outlining their commitment to tackle climate change and other environmental and social issues. Only last month, China, the biggest manufacturer, highlighted its ambition to be net zero by 2060. So commitments of this source can signal policy change and can be a really big opportunity for circular economy, because circular economy can be a tool that could be utilized to help governments achieve those governments and business achieve those goals of net zero. So within the UK, fashion and textiles has become, I guess, more of a focus of environmental policy. So the waste strategy for England highlights textiles as a key waste stream to address and outlines potential policy which could be introduced to reduce textile waste, such as extended producer responsibility, as well as separate collection for textiles. The textile sector has been of interest to the government for some time, with the introduction of SCAP, so the Sustainable Clothing Action Plan in 2012, and it's likely to continue as SCAP is revamped and reintroduced for its expiration this year. So in a similar way that governmental commitments and declarations can highlight impending policy change and commitments by industry themselves can do the same. So the signatories of SCAP, for instance, represented retailers and brands that sold more than half of UK clothing. Almost every large fashion and apparel business has a commitment to either achieve an environmental, circular, or sustainable goal. I've highlighted just a few of them. So you can see Caring Group, which is one of the biggest. The LVMH has theirs, ASOS, the British Retail Consortium as well. So what this means is that environmental, circular, and sustainable action are becoming more of an industry trend. And this is not just true for only the fashion industry. This is also across the piece in various sectors. This is something that the Business of Fashion, as well as McKinsey report on the state of fashion highlighted. The report stated that sustainability was a crucial theme for the industry, which means that implementing sustainability is becoming core to business survival and thriving, which is something that businesses should be thinking about actively, especially in a time like this where we're talking about coronavirus, as well as the impending UK exit from the EU. So one of the other big, I guess, reasons why circular economy should be of interest is around the innovation that could come across because of circular economy. So if you think about the circular economy, going away from that take, make, dispose model, which you can see above on the top, into a model that basically enables resources to be kept in use for as long as possible and for waste to be minimized. This option provides businesses an opportunity to basically have more touch points with their customers post-purchase. So if you think about rental, for instance, or let's say repair. So if I'll use Ellen's business, which kind of will be giving the talk after me as an example. So if they sold carpets and then their customer said to them they wanted some repairs, that opportunity to offer repair as a service basically gives them an opportunity to have an understanding of how their product is performing, as well as have an understanding of where their customer is going and potentially using that data to improve their product, as well as provide new services and generate new revenue. So in thinking about, I guess, job opportunities and skills that might be coming off the back of circularity, data analysis has a potential to be a really important one. There's a lot of conversations that are happening at the moment within the tech sector and how important big data is within in the tech space, but that conversation has not necessarily shifted into circular economy. So that's kind of one of the things I wanted to highlight as an opportunity. So if anyone's interested in coding and analyzing data or Excel, yeah, keep at it. It would be a really useful skill. Circularity also provides an opportunity for business to be able to have better control over their supply chain by using their waste as a resource. So in terms of the skills that are basically you can utilize as part of that process is being able to be a process engineer. So creating a system that allows you to design for circularity and creating equipment processes that enable circularity to basically happen in reality. There's also the improvement in efficiencies through data collected through post-consumption. So the final, I guess, aspect that I wanted to cover of why environmental, circular, and sustainable action should be taken is to protect the business from the depletion of finite resources. As you're probably aware, the production of textiles requires a lot of resources. The RLC is probably one of the best illustrations of this point. The diversion of water sources from the RLC to cotton farms in the area has been linked to the loss of the body of water you're looking at the moment. So the images on your screen show the changes between 2003 and 2018. So global production of clothing is expected to continue to grow. So prior to the pandemic, McKinsey highlighted that the sector was estimated to grow 3 to 4%, while the Ellen MacArthur Foundation found that clothing production had doubled in the last 15 years. Meanwhile, only about less than 1% of materials in production were recycled to create new clothes. In a world with limited resources, there should be a concern for businesses and people. Businesses should be looking for ways to maximize their resources, and circular economy can provide an opportunity for that to happen. So what you've heard is kind of why you should take action. But I'm sure if you're anything like my former clients, you're probably thinking about all the challenges you're likely to face as you make this happen, especially if you're a small business. So you're likely to have limitations in funding, expertise on sustainability and circularity within your business. But I guess there are many opportunities to acquire funding. So NatWest have their climate accelerator kind of happening at the moment that business can engage with and apply for. And within Yorkshire, we have our resource efficient business program, where we basically support businesses with consulting services and give them that knowledge that might be missing within their business. And then basically allow them to be able to scale and support them along that journey. And a lot of different governments are thinking along those lines of how they can support business and people. So for you as individuals, what are some of the skills and opportunities that you might see in the future? So as I mentioned, data analysis is likely to be a key one. So being able to analyze data, be able to predict trends for the future, can provide companies with insight into how their customers are, what their customers are interested in, what the trajectory of their products and their services could potentially be. There's also repair technician roles that will be available as repair becomes an important part of kind of the circular economy. So if you're thinking about your iPhone, so as much as, of course, you can get your iPhone fixed within the Apple store, there's also official Apple certified kind of repairers that are available. So that could also provide an opportunity within business and also a job as well. And then there's process operators and remanufacturing engineers roles that basically enable processes and equipment to be developed that allow circular economy to become a reality. So as I mentioned at the start, I thought I'd give a positive spin on all the stuff that we're doing. So within my role at the moment, I work for West Yorkshire, and we have our resource efficient business program. And so what we do is we provide companies, SMEs, with 30 days of free consulting services, and that happens in 3 stages. So there's the initial conversation with me where we kind of go through how the circular economy might work for our business. And then if they're interested in participating in the program, we work with a consulting partner and they get 2 days of initial support where it's kind of more diagnostic, getting a better feel for how the circular economy could look within their business. And then off the back of that, the recommendations that come off that. And then that goes into stage 2 as a deeper dive, so further research into the recommendations that came off the back of stage 1. And then stage 3 is kind of a fuller package of support, anything from assessing the market and making sure that the idea or the business model that we're recommending works for the business and their customers, because there's nothing worse than taking to market an opportunity that doesn't actually work for your customers. It's not necessarily good business. It can include looking at the financial model, so how realistically could this work for a business, as well as developing an action plan that basically highlights step by step what a business or what actions businesses can take to make themselves more circular. And I guess just to cover this off, to be eligible, you have to be within our region. So, but there are other kind of programs that might be available. So as I mentioned, there's NatWest kind of doing some work in that area, and I'm sure other governments as well will be working within that space. And that kind of brings me to the end. So thank you so much for listening. I hope it was useful. And if you have any questions, please feel free to shout.
Thanks, Chidubem. I've got a question actually, if that's okay, just to kick us off. Is in your experience of working with those businesses in your region, which, you know, I understand obviously we've got different funding mechanisms here in Wales, but you're doing the same work as many others here. What are you seeing the thing that businesses need the most help with right now? Is it understanding their materials? Is it understanding their how to connect with other people? What are the things that you're seeing trends in with the businesses that you're working with in terms of what they need to try and generate jobs and generate stronger businesses?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's almost a cop-out answer because it's a mixed bag. But the main things that you kind of see, or I've been seeing when I'm talking to businesses, is the biggest challenges around money. Financing and funding is a really big issue. Understanding what the circular economy is and how it can realistically work for them is another barrier. Because sometimes when conversations are being had around circularity, they're usually positioned as environmental actions as opposed to kind of making business sense. So it's all around kind of engaging with businesses and highlighting to them that this is actually something that's good for your business. Which is easy to do now with everything happening with COVID. And well, it's kind of a mix. It's kind of easy to do because you can sell it as like, okay, you need to take this action because then it'll help you in the long run. But then having that initial breakthrough can be a bit challenging because COVID is a priority and takes precedent over a lot of things that are maybe seen as not necessarily that important right now.
Okay, thanks. And do any of the other panel have something to add to that question really about, you know, and around the kind of connecting up of businesses and connecting up of materials? Ellen, have you had experience of that?
Yes and no. I mean, you know, for me, it's all about building relationships really, and challenging the norm. And in terms of the kind of organisations that we work with, we rely absolutely on partnerships, and relationships are absolutely key to our development, and really without kind of building up, and not in a similar sort of, you know, one person's waste is another person's resource basically. So there's a lot of that. There's so much room for opportunity between that. So it's just kind of finding, isn't it, between us, how we can share that resource in the most efficient way, really.
Yeah, it seems to me there's a gap somewhere where we need some kind of portal that can help businesses connect up. So, like you say, the one person's waste is another person's supply chain, another person's, you know, gold dust. So how that's something I think that keeps playing back to me on a regular basis, is the need for that connectivity between businesses and the training and support actually as well. I've got a couple of
I guess something to add on to that is kind of, in having conversations with businesses around waste, there is some confusion about what comes off at the back end. And then there is, I guess, some value in terms of providing support to businesses to understand what their makeup of their waste looks like, and also potentially how can that be resourced, or where is that need from another person for that particular waste type. Because until businesses see that there is value in either separating, they're not necessarily going to do it. It's just a hurdle for them.
Okay. I've got a question from Gabriella. Gabriella, a really interesting one regarding about greenwashing, and if you'd like to ask a question though, Gabriella, to the panel.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for your talk. You did it really well considering how limited time you had. Just touching upon what you mentioned about ASOS and the role of like industries setting trends, which is really important. But what are your thoughts around the greenwashing side to it? So, you know, ASOS have signed up, they're taking this pledge. And as a consumer, if I wasn't necessarily aware of the circular economy and initiatives, you know, I would sort of think, right, okay, so they're doing something, so I'll just buy more and it's going to be fine. Whereas actually, I feel that the role is on the consumer to also educate, and where is that conversation around, you know, actually it's not about needing more, it's what, you know, what is it that you have, what is it that you need. So yeah, what are your thoughts on all of that? I know it's sort of consumer and the person, the industry, but how do we sort of tackle those challenging questions?
Yeah, I love this, because this always this kind of always comes up. So with there is definitely an aspect in terms of there's not enough being done on the consumption side, especially within the fashion sector. So I think a lot more needs to be done in terms of educating the consumer on what role they play. And I think the disconnect between that education of like providing information to the consumer is because businesses have not traditionally seen that as their role. But as more consumers are asking those questions, and businesses are seeing that aspect of it as being more, I guess it's more interesting as a business proposition to be able to continuously engage with your customer and say, okay, you bought from us, here's how you take on the work that we've started to do. There's likely to be more happening, but there is still that massive gap at the moment where people aren't necessarily doing that. But with greenwashing, on that, I think that is a fundamental issue within fashion. And ironically, I did my thesis on this all around kind of how the lack of definition of what sustainability means within the sector is a huge issue, because anyone can claim to be sustainable without actually having specific guidance to highlight what does that actually mean. Because if you say, oh, I make a sustainable product because I make it from recycled bottles, then it's like, oh, that's sustainable. But someone else can say, oh, I'm sustainable because I pay people a fair wage, or I'm sustainable because I use only organic cotton. So there's no clear definition of what sustainability
Thank you.
means. And I think that's one of the things that needs to change.
Okay.
But in even saying that, it's so complicated.
Thanks, Chidubem. It's a huge topic. It is a huge topic, and I'm just conscious of time as well. But I would just like to pick up from the chat line that David Warren is here from Welsh Government. Thank you, David, for attending, and he has put in some very helpful links that include some business support for that's happening here in Wales. That includes Rap Cymru and I have to say I work with for Rap on projects, and they have got an amazing amount of data and information available, and it's all online. So he's put the web link in there for you. Business Wales offer a range of support as well for their Green Growth Pledge, which I think Rhian is going to reference some more about later. And Welsh Government themselves have got various foundation economy type funds as well that can help businesses get off the ground. So it's well worth looking at those links that David's put in, and by all means ask further questions on that. I'm going to move on. There's a couple more questions in the chat, but I'll bring them in later. I'd like to hand over now to Ellen Petts from Greenstream. Sorry, I will just need to get my tech moving a minute. Ellen has had extensive experience in this area. She's previously done 10 years experience in starting out in education and working with waste strategy and communication and community-based sustainable waste management. But then she went on to set up Greenstream, Flooring Community Interest Company in 2008. And that is based on a circular business model in which reuse of an otherwise what would be a wasted material, this is carpet waste, commercial carpet tile, so everything that comes up out of commercial buildings, in order to create community employment and wealth. And the organisation has grown from being an initial great idea to 12 years on to being a multi-award winning social enterprise that employs 9 staff in 2 warehouses in Rhondda and Taff, and supports hundreds of volunteers and placements. So from the site in Rhondda, Greenstream supplies and fits flooring throughout its circular office flooring supply and fit service, while on a national basis, the organisation supplies the carpet industry with a zero waste recovery service of commercial carpet tiles. So Ellen is closing the loop with this organisation. And the organisation's social programmes also include a large community donation scheme and affordable flooring programme in which free carpet is provided to social housing tenants in need of their local, which they usually get via their local housing association. So Ellen has now got over 20 years experience of resource recovery and the circular economy, 10 of that being spent setting up and developing a disruptor business and that aims to maximise the community benefit of material that's traditionally had zero value and is certainly worth saving. So on that note, I will hand you over to Ellen to allow her to share. If I handed over already, Ellen.
Okay.
Yes, I think you have.
Have you got that?
Have you got it?
Yeah. Can you see the slide? Got it?
Not yet.
Oh.
Worked perfectly earlier, didn't it? Let me double check now.
Ah,
there you go. Your host now. Sorry, try now.
Okay, can you see that now?
Try again.
Sorry. Okay. Da, da, da. See it? Are we there? Hello?
No, I can't see it still.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, you are host.
I am host, am I? Right. Sorry, apologies for this. Okay, can you see that now?
No, sorry.
Ah, sorry. Okay, technical hitch. Right, am I definitely host?
Yeah, I am no longer host. I'll double check. Yeah, you're host.
Right. Okay. Can you see that? So sorry. Can you see that, Tara?
No, it says at the moment that you're currently sharing screen. I don't know why I can't see it.
God. Okay. Apologies for this. It's there.
Do you want me to try? Do you want to try handing back to me, then me handing back over again?
Okay.
That works.
Yeah. Let's try that.
Apologies, everyone.
Yeah, apologies. Yeah. Hide. What do I do there? The little dot. Then what am I supposed to do then? Sorry.
Make me go onto my screen and make me host.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay. Make a host. Right. Yes. Okay. So you're the host.
Okay.
So
Right.
make me.
I will now try again. Try now.
Can you see that? Can you see that?
No.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, okay, well, I mean, I'm not going to worry too much about the PowerPoint presentation because it really doesn't matter. I mean, I'll just have to follow it through myself. Yeah, which is really unfortunate actually, because it was fine before, wasn't it?
I just say Alison has offered, she's saying, Ellen, have you selected the screen from the window?
Selected the screen from the window.
Then Alison, if you can just explain that, if you come off mute.
Sorry.
And usually when you share a screen, you get another window that pops up and it shows you your whole laptop screen, or it shows you your PowerPoint screen, and you can select that to share.
If we can't do it this time round, we'll move on then, Ellen, you just talk it through.
I say, Ellen, you're a passionate speaker. I don't think we need images to go with you.
Thanks, Alison. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Apologies all for that. Yeah, it was absolutely fine, wasn't it, when we tried?
It was, yeah.
No problem. So anyway, I'm just going to start really to talk about three key elements: the kind of the why, the how, and very simply the what. Really, you know, I'm a very sort of practical, pragmatic kind of person. And sort of 9-10 years ago, when I was running various recycling hotlines and involved with Waste Awareness Wales, running sort of communication programs, it was very obvious, even back then, sort of 10-12 years ago, that, you know, we have this enormous resource. We were getting endless telephone calls from companies wanting to kind of, you know, find a remedy for their Hessian sacks that they were importing peanuts in and dumping, you know, you name it. There was this vast amounts of material. So, you know, the greatest threat to our planet, as Robert Swan, the explorer, says, is the belief that somebody else will save it. Now, I'm not saying we don't claim to be saving the planet. But when I came across the problem of commercial carpet tiles, I thought, well, basically, let's see if we can do something else with this material. This material is horrible in terms of the environment. It's a huge amount of carbon and energy that goes into this material. It's at any one time in the UK alone, there are 60 million meters of this material in circulation. So they're in every single commercial space. And to be totally honest with you, at the time, and the carpet industry is renowned for being extremely laggard, and really it's sort of 10 years ago, even more so. Very little thought about anything but that first use. It's renowned for making products that are very durable, very long-standing, and the whole consideration of going into that material is what can we do in terms of its first use. And that, unfortunately, has been the default of that kind of practice. So when we came across this problem, a few of us got together and we thought, well, actually, looking at this material and looking at it properly, has it actually got an opportunity to do something else with it, to create jobs? Has it got the potential for second life? And frankly, it did. It did have that opportunity. 10-11 years ago, there was nobody looking at that second life opportunity. Nobody looking at kind of, I mean, what we do is basically extend the life cycle of a material that has the propensity to be used on the floor for 20 to 25 years because of its composition, and tends to be on a floor for 5 to 7 years because of aesthetics, because of company policies, because of changing fashion, basically. Very similar to clothes. You might not consider it as a fashion item, but funny enough, carpet is a fashion item in terms of trends and nuances such as that. So basically, you know, we gave it a go. We set up a warehouse in an area of low employment, and we started to work with a key carpet manufacturer, a global manufacturer, in terms of them saying to their customers, we can do something better with this material, we can extend its life cycle. So it's giving them the potential for additional touch points. So it's giving them the opportunity to say to their customer, we care, this is what's going to happen to this material. It isn't necessarily, once you change, going to be just chucked to the skip, forgotten about. There is an audit that we can give you that provides them with a better feeling. Now, 10 years ago, you know, that really wasn't kind of a thing that sort of was an ambition of large corporates, but now it really is. So the whole context has changed for us, and the opportunity for material recovery is enormous, and we are touching about 80,000 meters ourselves a year now. We've started at literally 4,000 meters a year, and that material sort that we do, material sort, clean, regrading, and then reselling, is providing the 9 employees with the work that we do. So we're a micro business still, and it's been very, very challenging to create a market for a material that frankly nobody considered had any value whatsoever, particularly to use it back into the office sector that we've done. So we had to be driven by more than simply making money. So we were driven as a social enterprise around the people that we knew could be employed by this very manual, laborious job, which is literally physically manually going through this material, manually sorting it, because you can't do it by any other method than regrading through manual eyesight. So the guys that, some of the pictures here are people that have been employed by us, or we've helped, or whatever, and it's a very, very manual, labor intensive work, and that's really why we're doing it. It's that opportunity to create well-being opportunities for either well-being in terms of the people that actually, and those 2 guys on the left are 2 homeless. Oh, you can't see the PowerPoint, sorry, I'm forgetting you can't see the PowerPoint. These people are homeless people who are getting carpets that otherwise wouldn't have it, to the employers and the volunteers and the placements that we have going through our operation. In terms of what we do now, we've moved from simply just taking that material and providing for the carpet industry partners that we work with additional life cycle opportunities and additional touch points for their customers. We've moved from that, from very much turning that resource that we have also into a resource in terms of this a proposition to the market in terms of a circular offer. So instead of a local authority, for example, who, you know, by default would be sold new, and the general carpet industry, the carpet contractors anyway, would only sell new, we are going into an office and saying, actually, do you know, you don't need to necessarily buy new. There's actually some stuff there that you can save. So we'll take that material back in for you, sort it, re-clean it, and then it may be able to be used by either yourselves or somebody else. Or we're looking at, and we're saying to them, we can provide you with some potential of some reuse that we've saved from somewhere else. So everybody gets a sort of an opportunity to actually buy less than buy more. And that's really, really important in our sales, and that's our unique proposition in terms of, compared to other supply and fit organisations. Now we're not about selling as much as we can. We're about selling actually as less as we can, and keeping that material ownership in terms of putting it on the floor, maintaining it as long as it's on the floor, keeping what's on the floor as long as possible, and then bringing it back, and then it gets recycled. So the model, the Ellen MacArthur model of circularity, which puts reuse, you know, design, reuse and refurbishment first before recycling, is actually a really practical and real option, and is actually, particularly in Wales, you know, we are driven by a very positive context legislative wise in terms of local authorities and public bodies getting to grips with that. I would say they're not there 100%, but a lot of them are very positively moving in the right direction. And so, you know, whether it's carpets or whether it's another product or service that they're using, I do think that things like the Wellbeing Act and the drivers that we've had from in terms of waste and circularity strategies are making a difference, and are providing a really positive context for other material opportunities You know, it's been very challenging because you have to educate as well as provide. But once you educate a buyer or a procurement, the right contact in the right department, and that's tricky to find as a micro organization. Well, once you educate that person, they're absolutely sold. They're on board because they're saving money, they're saving resources, and they're finding it a lot easier to meet their to meet the criteria that's now being demanded through national legislation in terms of procurement and requesting more sustainable, more community benefits, more of the context drivers that are pushing this agenda in Wales in particular.
Ellen, if I could just come in there. Sorry, yeah, no, we're running a bit short on time. I'm conscious that we've got Rhian as well.
Yeah,
I think if we could, I would just like to ask you about how you're now on the cusp really of considering how to grow the business and to expand further, and to really focus in on the kind of the jobs, what your ambition for jobs is there.
Yeah, okay. Well,
just to round up on that, and then we'll move on.
Okay, sorry, Tara. Okay.
Okay, well, no, you're right. No, I could listen to you all night, but I know we haven't got all night. So.
No, okay. We, because of our experienced and you know, we're sort of fairly solid now in terms of the resources that we've got, etc., etc. We've got two main ambitions, which we truly believe can create further employment in Wales. One of them is going back to carpets. It's about the problem of broadloom carpet and the non-sustainable options that are currently facing local authorities and the carpet industry in terms of post-consumer. This is very distinctly post-consumer carpet. We've got an ambition, and we've partnered up with a UK company who are looking to set up regional processing sites, which will provide pellets, plastic pellets, because broadloom carpet is 99% plastic, frankly, to markets like the carpet, the car manufacturing industry for doors, etc., etc. So that's a large project potential that we're very keen on partnering up in terms of creating employment in Wales for Wales around the circular economy. The second one, which is very dear to my heart, is by increasing the space. We've got 2 units now, about to take on 3 in our industrial estate. We'd like to take on that entire small industrial estate in the middle of the Rhondda, in the gateway to Rhondda actually, and create a circular hub where we're providing supported workshop space for startups, circular startups who need support, who need a bit of mentoring in terms of setting up themselves in another aspect of circular material return, reuse, refurbishment.
And I just want to say how fantastic I think that is, and how much I think that is sort of pathfinding for us in Wales to have that being led as well by your experience in this area, because and I think it's got masses of potential. What we need to do now though is if we could save further questions for Ellen till later on, and if I could bring in Rhian, because there's some questions in the chat, Ellen, that we'll come back to for you. But if you could hand back over to myself so I can push over to Rhian, that would be great. And then I'll just quickly run through Rhian's introduction. So Rhian Edwards is the Commercial Director at Wales Co-operative Centre, based here in Caerphilly. Rhian leads on the Centre's consultancy offer, which is working with public and private sector bodies to look at how they can enhance social value through alternative models of service delivery. Rhian has also worked on the social enterprise and cooperative sector since 2003. And is keen to support more social enterprise models in providing circular economy solutions for the public sector. So Rhian is very much a port of call to go to, and her team, when you're considering new startups or wish to develop your social business that you've already got established. So Rhian, if you could unmute, and I will hand over to you.
Yeah, no presentation no formal presentation slides from me. It's nice and low tech. So yeah, I mean, as Tara said, I work for an organisation called the Wales Co-operative Centre. For those who don't know who we are, we're an independent organisation, a very values-driven organisation. Basically, we exist to strengthen and empower Welsh communities, and we principally do that by supporting the growth of the social enterprise cooperative sector and by delivering projects that basically tackle exclusion and provide skills for people. So I will really put my hands up and say that I am not a circular economy expert. Ellen and our other speaker this evening are by far the more technical experts than me. What I thought I would just share with you is just some insights in terms of the social enterprise sector and the economic opportunity that we're seeing circular economy activity present. So every 2 years we do a mapping exercise of the social enterprise sector in Wales, and just to give you a flavour of the scale, the last exercise we did in 2019 identified 2,022 social businesses contributing £3.18 billion in terms of turnover to the Welsh economy, and importantly providing 55,000 jobs as well. But interestingly, when I looked at that data, even though you couldn't get a breakdown of organisations within the environmental sector, what it did ask was, of those businesses surveyed, what were the kind of future prospects in terms of product development? And interestingly, 15% of them said they were looking at environmental based products, which I think is quite interesting in terms of moving into that space. And when you look at the social objectives of social enterprises, because obviously social enterprises and cooperatives exist across what we call the kind of 3 pillars of social support in terms of social, financial and environmental, protecting the environment was obviously a key driver for the sector. In terms of some of the work that we've done recently, and just to give you a flavour of where the sector is involving itself in circular economy activity, and obviously Elling is one of our key leading lights really in this field. I mean, we and it's interesting, I can see Alison is on the call as well, because I've done some work with Alison for Public Health Wales, and we did a piece of work actually probably about 18 months ago now with Public Health Wales, where we were just looking at what would be the general opportunity to consider a new model in the way that the public sector deals with office furniture, for example, and whether there was a social enterprise circular economy solution that could respond to that. So we did some feasibility study research in respect to that, and what was interesting was that we have in Wales a really strong infrastructure of social enterprises that are able to contribute to a growth in circular economy activity. But what we found was they were all almost too micro in their own right to take on that challenge, and there needed to be this kind of stimulus around cooperative activity amongst the sector. So very much we looked at the idea of collaborative models, regionalised collaborative models that could respond to that opportunity. And that's something that I just wanted to kind of put out there this evening really, is that needs time. And I think from the public sector's perspective, if you're looking at this and you're really serious about engaging the social enterprise cooperative sector in the delivery of circular economy activity, then what we need to do is we need to support and mobilise that market to be able to respond. And I think that's the key thing. The other thing that we certainly found in terms of the way in which social enterprises can create job opportunities is that not only they're creating job opportunities, but those job opportunities are being created for people who are usually most disadvantaged from the marketplace as well. So they're actually kind of re-engaging people who aren't necessarily kind of in mainstream employment at that time. So it's creating an even bigger social value in terms of the way in which you can connect that sector of the economy to creating circular economic activity. So for us, it's a win-win, but there needs to be some investment in mobilising the community, not just in terms of, as I say, consortia activity, but also diversification. So one of our clients with our social enterprise support projects in-house called Social Business Wales, one of our clients is Merthyr Tydfil Institute for the Blind, for example, that Ellen will know really well. So they are traditionally They do a lot with wood, for example, so they've moved into the furniture market. But also they're one of what we call a Welsh Government social value pilot, where they're actually working with a private sector business. So it's a really interesting kind of tripartite arrangement between a social enterprise, a private sector business, and Welsh Government in setting up a manufacturing kind of establishment in the valleys that would deal with recycled paint and actually kind of, work within the public sector to sell back recycled paint into that supply chain. From an economic perspective, the reason both the Chidubem Institute of the Blind were identified is not that they've dealt with recycled paint before, but they know how to run, for example, an intermediate labour market. So they know how to run a business which provides economic employment and training opportunities for people who are disadvantaged from the marketplace, so they can diversify and lend their skill set to that particular environmental activity. So I think that's another thing that we need to think about, is diversification, and again how we support, invest and mobilise the social enterprise cooperative sector to be able to diversify appropriately to respond to some of these opportunities. I mean, we've also looked at, there's lots of social enterprises across Wales, to be honest, that are doing some fantastic stuff. Crest up in North Wales, for example, that have had some investment to obviously create a community kind of recycling, circular economy hub up in North Wales. And I think that's the other thing that we need to think about here, is it is about jobs, but it's also about asset development and asset retention as well. I think you've got a real opportunity there. I mean, Ellen was just talking there about, an opportunity to kind of have more of a kind of physical space within the valleys. So I think there's some real opportunities to connect a lot of social issues and a lot of social exclusion issues into this kind of core concept called the circular economy, but just thinking about it in terms of delivering it in a slightly different way. So I think I'll kind of stop there really in terms of just that overview. I mean, in terms of the support, no, I won't stop there actually. In terms of support available from the centre, we run the principal social enterprise and business support intervention called Social Business Wales, which supports both growth organisations, so social enterprises that are that are existing, but also we have a new starts project as well. So for any kind of budding social entrepreneurs out there who perhaps have a circular economy kind of business idea, I want to kind of orientate that into more of a kind of social enterprise cooperative model, then please kind of come and speak to us and we can have that conversation with you. And in terms of mainstreaming the kind of concepts around environmental sustainability within the social enterprise sector, part of our kind of project orientation is around what we call cross-cutting themes. So we are working with social businesses every day really to get them to think about that sustainability is not an add-on, it's actually a core business consideration that can, save them money or can actually reposition them to be able to respond to new opportunities if they're able to do things in a more sustainable way. So it's very much at the core of what we deliver. And there's some really exciting opportunities, and I think the social enterprise sector is really well placed to support circular economy activity, but the sector needs time to mobilise to work cooperatively to respond to that, because I think some of the public sector opportunities might be a bit big for one organisation to respond to.
Okay. Thanks, Rhian, that's great. I just wanted to take your view on something that you said around things that are needed in terms of stimulating the market to respond. Are there tools or things or ideas that you've got of what we actually need to do to make that happen? How do we start to make to stimulate that market? What is it that you think's missing?
Well, I see Ellen smiling. Ellen can probably come in, particularly when we're talking about new models of delivery, or you're looking at people. One of the big issues, interestingly, when we did the research actually for Public Health Wales, one of the big issues when I spoke to those social enterprises, particularly in the reuse kind of sector and looking at kind of furniture, was that they recognised the real opportunities for diversification, but what they couldn't see was any clear volume of pipeline of future demand. So it was really difficult. It's that tipping point, isn't it, of when for example, if it was a public sector opportunity, what's the tipping point that gives that sector confidence that there is going to be an ongoing kind of business demand, kind of a business need to justify then from that social enterprises perspective, investing in whatever kind of capital requirements it would need to respond to that. And I think that there's a bit of chicken and egg there, and I don't think we've cracked that.
So building demand is a key path, and perhaps that's where public sector need to step in to create that demand within their own assets and buying power. And I know that Welsh Government are working with RAP to try and stimulate that. So I think that's a key responsibility they can take.
Can I just say,
yeah, sure.
in my experience of this, there's a real gap. There's a massive gap between, there's a really goodwill in public bodies to do the right thing, and I am approached by so many large organisations saying, oh, we really want enterprises, we really the capacity to deliver a service is so small compared to the demand. But the trouble is, there's the gap it can be filled if there's a real kind of work in progress. If the relationship between the two can be further understood and developed, then it is possible, and I have had experience of that, for the public sector body it doesn't have to be public sector, larger organisation, larger demand, put it like that, to actually understand that capacity and maybe ask for a smaller ask, or ask for part of the ask. And those kind of things can happen. And then eventually, if they're starting to ask for the part of the ask, they then start to ask for a bit more of the ask. And it helps that social enterprise, or those social enterprise consortia, or whoever it is, to develop into that space. So I really do think it's about long-term developments of relationships and understanding each other, and working together, and having that commitment to work together and understand. It's not about putting out a contract and a tender. I
agree. And I think a lot of it as well is about how these larger organisations can think ahead a bit more about pipelining their work, the contracts that they do want to put out, and then planning more sufficiently how they're going to stimulate that supply chain. Because I think it's often it's about the pre-planning phases for large corporations and large sector. So I think that's something that we can work on within the various organisations supporting public sectors and large organisations to do that.
Definitely.
That's great, thank you. I just want to before we get much further, just want to pick up with on Siwan Rees. We had advertised that Siwan would be attending. Unfortunately, she's been battling for the last couple of days to try and be here with the health issue, but just couldn't make it. So I have got some information that I can share in the chat box about what NatWest are offering, and then we can just go into further questions and discussion. So Siwan is the Entrepreneur Development Manager, and similar to Rhian is there to support entrepreneurs, and she's supported 300 so far through the NatWest Accelerator, and she's dedicated to helping businesses thrive. That purpose plays a key role in support of families, business and local communities. Her background's also in academia and procurement and supply chain, and I'm aware that Siwan is undergoing specific circular economy learning as part of her role on climate change. And she's recently supported the Climate Accelerator Programme, which is a new programme NatWest have put out there, which is specifically to help connect businesses to opportunities and networks that help to increase the knowledge and awareness of how they can have a positive impact. So her work is essentially working towards to help businesses, but it's very specifically also to offer immediate support. So anyone can join who's got a business can join the Business Builder, which is free, and it would mean registering for the community by literally going to natwestbusinessbuilder.com and following the registration, and the individuals then can unlock learning, events, connections and opportunities to learn more about other businesses and individuals. So there's that, and then the Climate Accelerator Programme is is a further addition, which NatWest are building now. They've just had the first cohort through, or about to take the first cohort through, but they will usually revisit that every 3 months. So I'll post some links in the chat for that for you to have a look at, because if you are considering expanding, or you're considering a new idea and want to really learn how to get your business, there's basic business support as well as the climate change support. So it's a great opportunity, and Shuin, is happy to talk on one of our future webinars about that in a bit more detail as well. So she gives her apologies for not being able to be here tonight. So we've got a few minutes left, 5 minutes left, 5 to 10 minutes if people are willing to stay on for a little bit longer. And I had got some questions in the chat that I'd like to cover. So Alison, you raised a question, Alison Pinney, regarding sustainable consumer behaviour. Would you like to just ask that question in a bit more detail, what you were getting at there? You'd have to unmute though.
I know, I'm so sorry. I was just about to eat something then.
It's that time of the evening.
I thought I'd got away with it. No, I was just curious. I mean, so I'm relatively, for want of a poor choice of words, I'm a relative virgin to this whole circularity, but I understand aspects of it, having spent time with Tara and also from some work that I was doing in Public Health Wales. But what strikes me is that while industry itself is a massive driving force for change and their own productivity, they're also the major influence for getting consumers to change. So how do we get consumers to change? COVID, I'm reading, I hate to bring COVID into the argument, but COVID is obviously part of that change right now, because people are not able to go out and do what they would normally do, and therefore people are changing their perspective. So I'm particularly interested in, from a fashion perspective, as to how we drive through that consumer change from both industry perspective, but also the impact on COVID, from COVID.
So who in the panel would like to answer that? Is it Chidubem? Would you like to have a go on that one?
I guess it's such a complex question. It's like, because it's a little bit like a PhD. I feel like you do a thesis on it. But I guess in terms of, you're completely right, industry does have a role to play in terms of informing the consumer. And I think the way I usually think about it is having that role as an informant in a way. And I think along with media being kind of, I guess, thinking about your Attenboroughs and the impact of Blue Planet too, even though people who love plastic, or not who love plastic, but people who know the importance of plastics, please don't shoot me, because I know that's a whole different kind of complicated conversation. But I think media definitely has a role to play, as well as industry, in just kind of informing consumers about their role and how the actions that they take actually have an impact. I think that's probably where that kind of structure is for them, but also potentially just changing their business model. So looking at things like going from requiring people to own things to having more of a rental space, especially within the fashion industry. But then there's kind of from doing work within looking at rental, there's also the questions around people's perception of what rental is and leasing, and the fact that hygiene is such a massive, I guess, barrier. And I think COVID presents a really interesting opportunity there, because there is a lot more conversations happening around hygiene and how cleaning can take place. So what rental companies can do is actually just make their process transparent and be as transparent as possible within the cleaning process, because we don't know what goes on when we buy clothes from new anyways. But because that hygiene is such a barrier for rental, there's an opportunity to kind of open it up due to that interest from COVID and the knowledge that people are getting. I don't know if that completely answered your question.
Yeah,
I think it opened up a lot of other questions. But I think based on the examples that you gave in your presentation, are we seeing these industry leaders? I mean, ASOS likes to think of itself as positioning itself in a particular sort of environmental positioning. So are we seeing them doing anything that's different? We're seeing IKEA starting now in the UK to look at how they will recycle furniture. you know, we talk about vintage clothing and the effect of Bieber and things like that. Are we seeing ASOS, and are we seeing other brands doing that?
So there's not that much action. Well, there's some action being taken in terms of, I guess, the classic, your circular collection, and your take back scheme. And I think those play important roles, but I think one of the big barriers with take back and recyclability within textiles is actually the scalability of what happens on the back end. And because there's no solution on the back end of where if you collect clothes and then most things are blended fibers, and you can't actually separate the fibers to then recreate something different, there's an issue there. But then I think there's an opportunity for reuse and that vintage and the resale. And there is a lot of conversations at the moment around Generation Z and how they don't buy things new because they know they're not going to wear it that often. So they just kind of depop everything and then just sell it. So there's kind of a shift, and you can see that generationally where different generations have different perspectives on things. So there's a little bit of a shift that's just happening very, very, very slowly.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting to see what IKEA are doing, because they are actually forcing people to bring, well, not forcing people, they're encouraging people to bring their old furniture back so that they can then reuse that material back in their new goods that they then want them to buy. So there is a commercial aspect to what they're doing, which is where we need to get to. People still, that is that whole economic churn, isn't it? But I think fashion is so much harder as well with the materials. I would have thought is a big barrier there, Chidubem, as well, because of the complexity of those materials.
Yeah, everything is poly cotton blend or cotton nylon or something. Everything is kind of blended, so not that many materials are just cotton, polyester. So there's that complexity, but there's a little bit of work being done. It's just, yeah, it's such a hard one because it's just so, it's going to take a long time for the innovation to come into play. But a lot of people like your H&M foundations and I can't remember the name of the company, they're kind of working on those kind of innovations and solutions.
Okay, sorry, I just picking up on, thanks Chidubem. It's a complex area and I know it deserves a webinar all on its own fashion. I just, Rhian, if you could just make me host, that's fine. And I just want to say very massive thanks for you joining us this evening. Rhian's got to leave us now. But she's put a note in the chat to say about how you can get help. So that would be, please make use of that.
How do I make you host again? Sorry, I didn't realise you were hosting. I almost panicked then. I went to go leave and it's the meeting floor. I was like, no, I don't want to do that.
Click on the little dots on the top of my window, the blue dots, if you move your cursor up.
There we go, make host, brilliant.
Thanks, Rhian.
Thanks all, bye.
Bye. Yeah, there's a few more questions. I would like to pick up a couple that Brian, David and Alison have put through the chat, and Jen, if we can whiz through a couple of those. David, could you come on? You'd asked about the carpets and content of materials and how hard it is for Ellen to get people to come on board with the concept.
Yeah, no worries. I think Ellen's already had a go at answering that, but I think to me, I think one of my question is really around not just on floor tiles, but on refurbished, remanufactured products in general. Is really what are the barriers to people accessing those? Is it because they think they're going to get something secondhand and not quite top quality, or is it things like there are such long established relationships with previous providers, it's very difficult to get in there, etc.
I would say it's both, frankly, David. You know, there's long established supply routes, vested interest with current FM contractors and supply chains that, you know, we've done that forever, we continue to do that forever, so okay, fine. And you slowly chip away at that. But also there is the perception initially of quality, and that's why we've aligned ourselves very carefully with not the secondhand furniture guys, to be honest with you. You know, there are some fairly low standard secondhand, you know, office guys and that have been established that you can find in an industrial estate somewhere. and provide, you know, cheap second-hand office furniture, because there's plenty of it swirling about. But on the other side of it, there are some other, there are only a couple in the UK, I would say 2 or 3 in fact, of high quality branding, using branded office furniture, and we very much try to align ourselves with those guys. So if there's an office refit, it's put in at a high quality spec level, and we will, and you know, that goes for the flooring as well. We would only ever put in, you know, a high grade A, which we were graded A, which is basically looks like brand new. There is absolutely no evidence of it ever being reused, and sometimes it hasn't ever been used. It's just been put on the floor in a dilapidation by an agent, and they picked it up because a new tenant's come in, never been walked on anyway. So it's very much about how you align yourself, and branding ourselves on quality rather than just purely cheap is the way to go, frankly, on that, and that's why we do that.
Thanks, Ellen. That's great. There are a couple of questions that are similar from Gabriella and Finn. That, if you don't mind, I'll summarise. We're asking the panel is what could be done to encourage more collaboration between the public, private and social enterprise sector, and then what would that kind of fill in the gap space look like in practice? As in, does that focus on creating environments where businesses can talk to social enterprises directly, or would it focus on using intermediary organisations? You know, how can we close those gaps on a practical level? Any ideas that you've got there?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll go. Again, I don't want to take over, but I honestly think it's about giving that relationship time to understand each other, and you know, because it's all very well. There's been intermediates like Social Business Wales have done, you know, in fairness, very well-meaning meet the buyer events, and you know, I've just been to another one, and our Bevan are on South Wales. They genuinely want to work with the foundational economy, smaller businesses, and you know, they are interested, you know, because of the fantastic legislation we've got in Wales around circularity. But it's about time, to be honest with you. It really is, and about understanding each other's, you know, demands and supply, and working that through and working out how can that work. A one-off event, a buyer event, is not it. It simply isn't. It's got to be, and all of our experience working with all the local authorities that we work with and all the housing associations, it's been time only, and we've designed for them basically the contracts so that we could get the opportunity. So
you would have probably welcomed a much more kind of proactive way of bringing. I mean, you've kind of almost had to claw yourself through your way through all of this over the years. I guess what we're saying now is, how can we do this on a more proactive basis, isn't it? And what roles can, you know, Social Business Wales, cooperative, public sector, Welsh Government play in pulling those and wider businesses come together? And I think one of the areas that kind of missed out of all of this quite often, and it's perhaps another subject for another day, is the current waste management, waste treatment, recycling companies, because they will have an absolute role to play in all of this in order to make sure that materials move around. And how do we engage them in this side of things? Because, you know, they're movers and shifters at the moment. We don't always like where they're going, but they are the movers and shifters. They're the ones that got the infrastructure to do that. So how do we engage the CIWM in that? And I know we've got Brian Main on the line. I don't know if Brian could maybe offer a little bit of insight to that. Being the current chair of CIWM, and I'm sure this is probably a subject that you talk about a lot, Brian. Are you there still?
I think you have to dip out.
I think we've lost Brian, have we? Are you there, Brian? Oh, I think he's had to go, sorry. I should have checked that before you asked him. But again, I think that's an area that needs further exploration. Jennifer did just quickly ask you, Ellen, if the carpet materials that are put down on brand new, whether any of those have got recycled content that you're aware of.
Yeah, I mean, they do. Quite often there is recycled content in both consumer broadroom carpet and commercial carpet, which is great, and certainly that's a great move. And increasingly they are putting more and more recycled content. A lot of it is a big thing in the market about fishing nets being saved, and there's only so many fishing nets, mind you, can save, but there again, and being made in terms of recycled content into carpets. Unfortunately, and I mean this, bearing in mind I'm just talking about commercial carpets again now, there are 6 million in circulation, and we are the biggest recycler, reuser of that material in the UK in terms of reuse. That means, and we're only taking 80,000 meters a year, then the fact that it's got recycled content still means it's going into a mixed skip, and it's either being burnt or buried. So it's great that it's got recycled content in the first place, but unfortunately the waste stream at the moment, the way it's collected, it doesn't really make it go back into that being a recyclable product.
Yeah, and that's the challenge again, isn't it? Is how you get these materials being recovered and recovered and recovered, and managed before they actually get to be having to be recycled, isn't it? And I think that's the key role you're playing in that industry. I know, but it's just a quick
one to piggyback off your. I guess that kind of takes you back to that point of having the involvement of your waste managers. And I think in terms of the question around how do you get that collaboration happening, I think it's just kind of getting everyone in the room and getting people to understand what their roles are, because I've seen it from different perspectives. Businesses will say, oh, this is such a big issue and these people aren't supporting me, and then I have to explain it and break it down and say, actually, they want to support you, but here are the barriers for them. So it's just giving that perspective is kind of quite important, and that can happen online or virtually by people just asking questions.
I think it's about spending time with people and understanding, like I said.
Rachel Castell's picked up a good point, actually. I don't know if Rachel, if you want to make it yourself, but I think what you've triggered my mind in as well is the role technology and app development and connectivity that way has a role to play in how do we build up the right tech to deliver some of these gaps that we've got as well. And whether it's posting up that you've got some material here, people like Warpit use this technology to try and reuse and recover office furniture across different sectors. The technology gap here as well, I think, that we need to fill. So Rachel, do you want to we'll end on this question, because I think you've wrapped up some answers to a few people, but if you just want to make your point, and then I'll just go to the evening, so I think we've covered everybody's queries after that. Rachel, are you there?
Sure. Yeah, I am. Can you hear me? My connection's quite dodgy, so you can. So this is something that's really on our mind at the moment. I actually work with Finn, but we're a startup, very early stage, but we're looking at how to curate and enable conversations between consumers who have concerns and businesses who have concerns but don't know how to kind of create action together. And so we're looking at creating a product that kind of enables that. And our model is around pre-sales. So basically looking at everyone going, well, if sustainable options are available, I'd buy them. Well, creating a platform where people can pre-buy those things and go, well, look, we want them, the money's on the table. And if you supply them, then we'll be in and buy them. And that's connecting also a virtual space and a physical space. So people do want to have these conversations online and make comments, but I think nothing really makes a difference to humans more than seeing things in the visible world. And, so having a place where you can have a conversation virtually, create an action virtually, like pre-selling something or pledging to do something, and then going into a space where you can see that you've created a change. So we're looking at, human behavior, behavioral analysis, and how technology can enable those conversations and create action as well. So tech is the key to us in terms of joining the dots.
Thanks, Rachel. That's great. And sorry, what's your company name? Who are you with?
Oh, we're called Our Pledge. Our
Pledge.
OUR Pledge, PLEDGE.
Okay. If you could just post the website or any information
Absolutely.
you've got on that'd be great, because that sounds really interesting, and
Thank
it kind
you.
of accords with an idea I've got floating around in my brain about how to help improve collaboration, which is something I'm keen to do. So I think now it's time for me to wrap up and say absolutely thank you so much for everybody for attending and participating. You've been amazing, and of course thank you so much to our speakers, and particularly Ellen and Chidubem, who are still online, and to Rhian, obviously. We will hopefully hear from Shuan again, but I will find a way. Maybe I will put it, actually better to put it on Twitter, Shuan's information. We can do that through the Sustainable Wales Twitter feed. So keep an eye out for that. And I know that Sarah, or Sarah Murphy, who's also online, our chair, she's we're working on how we can develop a summary of the webinars once they've all been completed, so that we can share the learning, and we'll need to sort of think about how we can, you know, through GDPR and all that stuff, share that document with yourselves or the attendees, and to sort of think about where we may take the webinars after week 4, which is coming up. So Sarah will be back online with Margaret to deliver week 4 next week, so please tune in to that as well. And just a massive thank you for hanging on and staying on a little bit extra, but I think it was really exciting dialogue, and again thanks so much to our speakers, and it's fantastic to hear from you all. So thank you, and we will see you soon, hopefully. Bye.
Thank you.